Positives as we roll into Thursday morning. Appreciate all of you hanging out with us. College football FBS, the largest style, is officially here. Central Arkansas, which you last saw playing against Austin Peay on Saturday, now will be playing a Thursday game, and they will be playing without having had anyone test positive for the coronavirus, which is pretty awesome as it pertains to setting a precedent for whether or not it's safe to play college football. Central Arkansas will be playing UAB tonight. And we have also, like I said, the first FBS game of the season, South Alabama going up against Southern Miss. The data points continue to stack up that it is safe to play college football. Then on Saturday, we have a bunch of games. Then on Monday, we have games, all leading into Thursday's NFL contest between the Texans and the Chiefs. So I would tell you, go ahead and get ready for the start of the year. This is very, very good news. Now, last night, the NBA, couple of different games that came down to what felt like, frankly, WWE officiating. You didn't know what was going to happen, but the officials effectively had control of both games. The first one to be played was the Heat against the Bucks. This is what it sounded like as we got a win for the Heat after what felt like two missed calls from officials down the stretch. Here it was.
Butler baseline, step back for the win, and he is fouled. He has fouled Jimmy Butler, and he'll go to the line. Jimmy Butler got fouled, and a chance to win it at the free throw line with no time left on the clock. I have seen everything. For the win at the free throw line. Got it to go. Oh, it rolled on off the front of the rim and down and in. I thought it was going to pop out. Oh, my goodness. And that is the ball game. Oh, mercy me. The final score, Miami 116, Milwaukee 114. I don't believe what I just saw in this last minute of play.
That is the Milwaukee Bucks radio network. On top of that, so the Bucks, that is I'm assuming the Heat radio network, unless the Bucks radio network was really excited about watching their team lose a game. So now the Heat are up 2-0, and then we had another game 7, came down to the final inbounds possession, and that inbounds possession did not go well. By the way, the final, whatever it was, 2 seconds of this game, I stayed up to watch it. It felt like it took 45 minutes. And then finally, just an awful possession for the Oklahoma City Thunder. Initially, by the way, they had Steven Adams, if you were watching this, posted up. And I'm like, why didn't they just throw him a lob? It looked like they could have had a dunk to put the game into overtime. But instead, they inbounded it to him at the three-point line. He could do absolutely nothing. The Rockets survive. The big play in the survival was a block by James Harden. And this is what that block sounded like.
Westbrook with a deflection, poked it right back to Gilgeous-Alexander. He finds Dort, shoots for three, blocked by Harden. Jordan picks it back up, tried to throw it back off of James, and it went out of bounds with 0.5 of a second to go. Here we go, Gilgeous-Alexander looking to get it in. Comes into Adams, broken up by Westbrook, picked up by Tucker, and the Rockets win the game. They have beaten the Oklahoma City Thunder, and they're moving on to face the Lakers in the Western Conference semifinals. It wasn't pretty, but holy heck was it dramatic late tonight in Game 7.
All right, the Lakers now will play against the Houston Rockets. James Harden was not good, but they found a way to advance. The Houston Rockets did, and we've got Game 7 having led to the Clippers finally having an opponent as well, and they will be playing tonight, and the Clippers will be seeking to advance as we would anticipate that they would against the Lakers. Again, I feel like while there was a lot of attention in who would win these Game 7s and who would be able to advance, now that we know the 1, the 2, the 3, and the 4 have all advanced from the West, and tonight we got the Clippers against the Nuggets, and tomorrow, I believe it is, we will have the what was a very kind of questionable and wobbly at times Rockets franchise advancing to play against the Lakers. So that is the Western Conference. We are ahead of that in the Eastern Conference. That is your update on what is going on in the NBA. All right. I want to bring in the crew. Any big takeaways from that game last night, Danny G?
Which one do you want to start with?
I mean, I don't think it really matters for the I will say this about the somebody going down 0-2 or whatever the deficits are. Without a home court advantage, it doesn't really feel like that big of a deal if somebody comes out and goes up 2-0. I mean, the Rockets came out and went up 2-0 and were very fortunate to survive in their series. They almost lost 4 of the next 5. Again, they were fortunate to survive in advance. And I know the Bucks have lost 2 in a row, but I'm not necessarily sure that it spells their ultimate doom because, again, it's not like they're going back to Miami and having to deal with a Miami home crowd, although it is worth mentioning that the Heat are 6-0, and I believe the only undefeated team so far in the postseason.
Yeah, and I'll say this about the Rockets game. I never thought we would get on the air and say, man, what a great defensive play by Harden.
Yeah.
He really bailed himself out because, as he said right after the game, his offensive game was horse shih tzu. So, and they of course, live on TV,
I don't understand how they could bleep everything that happens on the court, and then they managed to have no delay at all for James Harden, and he dropped a curse word.
Yeah, I wondered the same thing. So the Rockets, who they're like offense, they don't play much defense. 2 great defensive stops at the end of the game to win that, to take that Game 7. And then the game right before that, man, those final sequences with those fouls called, 9 jump shooters were fouled in that game. And that's one thing we've been seeing in the bubble and in these playoffs is that I don't know if it's good defense or bad defense. We could debate that, but every shot pretty much is being contested. And if you put a hand on the jump shooter before or after they shoot or during the shot, just like we saw with Jimmy Butler with Giannis just putting his hand on him. No. And Middleton's shot before that wasn't a foul. He wasn't fouled either. So you had back-to-back controversial fouls there. I don't think either was. And that was pretty nuts. I mean, the referees, they were too involved at the end of that game.
Yeah, I mean, it feels a lot of times like the WWE. You're a big-time Spurs fan historically, Dub. What did you think of the way both those games ended? Did you watch them?
I watched them, yeah, and I thought the referees, like Danny G said, were way too involved. First of all, the Miami game, I agree with Danny G. I don't think either of those should have been called. And then secondly, in the late game, the call on James Harden as they were inbounding the ball right before they called timeout, that was a foul. It was only one free throw, and Gallinari missed it, but I mean, that was one of the most ridiculous foul calls I've ever seen. That was absolutely absurd.
Were you watching it, wondering why in the world on the first possession they didn't throw it to Steven Adams?
I was thinking that on the first possession, and I was thinking it on the second possession because the Rockets basically came out in the same exact defense, and I think the tallest guy on the floor was probably half a foot shorter than Steven Adams. So that was really a head-scratcher for me. That was a pretty horrendous set coming out of basically 3 timeouts because they had the review as well. So that was kind of a F- there grade for Billy Donovan on that last play.
No, when you don't get up a shot, and also it was kind of, for Chris Paul and all his trash talk about the way that the game went down the stretch of Game 6, to have a point guard of his caliber on the court and really not get a good look there. And now I know that they had to inbound the ball and everything else, but he nearly turned the ball over on that possession before the Lou Dort block as well. He missed a jumper in the lane after a steal. He just he wasn't as clutch as maybe he had thought he was coming into this game with a Game 7 at the age of 35. Credit to him because it felt like they were kind of sending him to Siberia when they traded him to Oklahoma City. And the Thunder had a pretty good season. And I imagine if you're listening to us right now and you're an Oklahoma City Thunder fan, it's a stinging loss. But I think the idea that you would have had a Game 7 with a possession to advance into the final 8 of the NBA season would have been a pretty big surprise given the trade of Russell Westbrook and grabbing Chris Paul and what people anticipated about this team coming into the season. So, meanwhile, the Houston Rockets, who have been star-crossed, I think it's fair to say, in their overall trajectory as a franchise, came really close to basically having everything explode on them here. Instead, they advance, and now they've got a chance at redemption, because if they beat the Lakers, then everybody would be like, oh, wow, Daryl Morey's a genius putting Russell Westbrook and James Harden together. I don't think they will, but at least they get that opportunity now in another series. Let me bring in Eddie Garcia. Eddie, what did you think? I'm sure you didn't watch any of the NBA, but give us an update here on what happened in the NHL. Anything worth knowing?
Well, yeah, the Colorado Avalanche were in a must-win situation. They beat the Dallas Stars, and they've evened that series at 3-3. So we're finally going to have a Game 7. Yes, finally a Game 7 coming up on Friday. Now, there are 2 games coming up tonight, both Game 6s. So if the underdogs win in those games, we could get a couple more Game 7s as well. But I actually did tune in at the end of the Rockets and the Thunder game, and then the call I saw on Giannis. You got to understand, look, I know I'm the hockey guy and all that, but I used to watch the NBA pretty religiously at one point, and then I decided to make the switch because I just thought hockey was a better sport. But you got to understand, from watching the NBA, in like the early 90s and the 80s and 90s, and then you watch the game now, and you're just like, my God, this is just a completely different game from when I was totally invested in the NBA. And that call on Giannis was a joke. I don't care if they did make a similar call right before that. I mean, I'm not even saying that, because he's a star, you can't call a foul on him. To decide the game like that with 2 free throws with no time left, I thought it was ridiculous.
Yeah, that decision was wild, but the whole final stretch of both games, it felt like the officials effectively took over.
Yeah, it was awful.
And I mean, even the way the players were yelling at them, the way down the stretch when they called the foul on the inbounds play, and then they were also calling a timeout, and Chris Paul's arguing, hey, you called a foul, and then they go back and they look at everything, and then we get one free throw from Gallinari who clanks it off, and that's the previous game with the way it ended against the Bucks. We'll see whether or not it's going to have a major impact in the series. Obviously, going down 0-2 is usually a death sentence, but again, we've seen teams fight back from a 3-1 deficit and nearly come back from an 0-2 deficit already. So I do think that the lack of home court advantage means that every game kind of stands alone more uniquely than they do in the past, where you're like, man, I hope we can get a split. I hope we can steal one on the road. Those kind of things obviously aren't in play in the same to the same degree now. Roberto, what stood out to you?
Yeah, I just hate. I used to enjoy the NBA when the referees let the guys play at the end, and having the referees determine the end of that first game was terrible. And then it almost happened in that second game when they called that foul on James Harden, but Gallinari missed the free throw there. So that just sucks to have the referees determine the games. And then the Game 7s, I don't know, for me, it just doesn't feel like a Game 7 without that home court advantage.
Yeah.
It just feels odd, man.
Yeah, that there's certainly an aspect of that is missing in a big way. And it also, I think, raises the issue of there's not that fear to me of getting down a couple of games like there might have been in the past.
Yeah,
We've already seen the Nuggets win 3 in a row to come back from a 3-1 series deficit against the Jazz. And now we've seen the Rockets almost choke away a 2-0 lead and lose 4 out of the final 5. So that in and of itself is it just feels quite a bit different. So being down or what to expect after a couple of games is not necessarily the story of the series. All right, when we come back, we'll ask Frank Isola what he thinks about all this. College football coming back, a lot of reason for optimism as the NFL is coming back next week as well, although I do think the NFL is under the radar. And you may hate preseason football, and I certainly do. I'm a season ticket holder, and I hate having to pay for it. But I do think it serves as an appetizer to the regular season, as we were saying yesterday with Jeff Schwartz. I feel like for many people, boom, the NFL is just going to be here. It's officially 1 week away today. 1 week from now, we'll be talking about a major game in the NFL. The Texans will be going on the road against the Chiefs, and I think it's going to sneak up on a lot of people. Now, maybe it'll help that we'll have college football tonight and on Saturday and on Monday. Maybe that will factor in substantially, but it's pretty wild to think about.